minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding the hearing. Of course, thanks to our witnesses. Thanks for your life of service to the country. The DoD and the Department of the Air Force are right.
Just a Vandenberg Space Force Space. Thank you very much. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Green is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding the hearing. Of course, thanks to our witnesses. Thanks for your life of service to the country. The DoD and the Department of the Air Force are rightfully pivoting to the global war on terror, from the global war on terror to the current threat posed by Russia and China. However, I have some significant concerns about the vulnerabilities for divesting platforms. I'm sure you've heard it already today. That provide significant combat capability before the sustainable replacement is ready and fielded. And as I told General Milley during our recent defense-wide budget hearing, I'm specifically concerned about the loss of JSTARS and AWACS. The Biden administration seems to be removing critical instruments from our toolkit. The plan is to stop funding these critical capabilities now and simply hope for new and more lethal and cost-effective replacements to roll out seamlessly. This budget diverts already scarce defense dollars into searching for replacement systems, leaving an extensive capabilities gap while a land war rages in Europe. The divestiture of these critical systems is occurring, I think, far too rapidly, and it's time for Congress to adequately fund the transition from legacy systems to their replacements. And I think there's also a mechanism out there. I've met with Representative Whitman, who sits a little further up on the dais than I, and he advised me about a formerly created and still authorized Naval Strategic Deterrence Fund. It could be a mechanism where we can put extra dollars there to cover the legacy systems and our ramp up of new systems so that the DoD budget top line can work for those members of both the administration and the Congress who want to see that the main budget stays flatline, much like we did the OCO over the years, the war on terror. Does that make sense? Am I making sense on that, how we would use those funds? We've already talked about inflation and things like that. I won't go into that. What I really want to ask today is if we put a working group together and got some Democrats on board with this, and would you guys be interested in working with that group for how we might be able to use this Naval Strategic Deterrence Fund that, again, has already been authorized by Congress to address the potential of the legacy systems coming out too soon? Would y'all be interested in putting people to help us with this working group?
I think what you're referring to is a fund that essentially separately funded the strategic deterrent, so
Yes.
that it didn't have the effect that it has on our budget. In our case, we have fully funded in our budget request, and we'll continue to do so, the strategic deterrent. I think that's a position the administration has taken.
There's apparently a
we
fund
don't
separate of DOD's budget. This is a fund that's separate of DOD budget, very much similar to the OCO. You'll recall we kind of abused that a little bit, stuck some stuff in the OCO in order to keep the budget flatline, the DOD budget flatline, and that helps people on both sides, particularly other parts of the country where being able to say we didn't, necessarily raise DOD's budget. There's the potential that we could keep legacy systems around a little longer, fund it through this. Your top line budget stays the same, and yet those systems stick around a little longer until the other systems are fully funded. And I'm just wondering if y'all are interested in that dialogue, and if you could loan us somebody with some ideas on that.
I'm going to have to decline for now, and the reason is that these ideas basically create a different way to count the money, but it's still the money, and we still have to spend what we have to spend on national security. It's a fact of history that we've made a big investment in the strategic deterrent decades ago, and then we lived off of that capital for a long time, and now we're having to recapitalize.
Sure, so I understand that comment, but what I want to be able to make sure, and what you all will be held very much accountable to, is the capability of our force. And as those legacy systems come down, that capabilities gap can't be there. And that's what I'm asking for you to work with members of both sides of the aisle to kind of think through what we can do in terms of making sure that those legacy systems are around long enough until the new stuff replacing that capability gets in the field.
We're open to new ideas always, but I think our budget request does accommodate a reasonable balance of current and future capabilities and fund the strategic deterrent. So I think we're asking for the money we need to do what we think is necessary.
You're asking for everything you need. There's nothing else you would need.
We have a balanced and I think a reasonable request that
Okay,
will
fair.
implement the National Defense.
Fair enough. We're going to continue the dialogue about it here, but we may have questions then in future testimony about it. Thank you both, and thanks for your service to our great country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.